Seems like it slowed down on people joining, so probably good when you are, Kate.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get started. Thanks everyone for joining us on this meeting about the Washington Street corridor. I'm Kate Birch. I'm a senior planner at North Star Planning, and I'm part of the project team for this work. You'll see some more members of the project team on Zoom. We have Nick Aceto from Aceto Landscape Architecture. Just wave. Eric Cousins, who's the director of planning in Auburn, Addie Smith-Ryman, who's a planner at North Star, and Jonathan Labonte, who can't wave, but is the director of transportation in Auburn. So our kind of agenda for tonight's meeting, we're going to introduce you to the project, give you an idea of the timeline, go through a little bit of the history of this project, the vision and the opportunity for this corridor. My colleague Addie will talk about some of the planning concepts that kind of this project is based on and the work we're trying to do. And then Nick, our landscape architect, will walk us through some of the initial planning concepts for reimagining Washington Street. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A at the end. Since this is a virtual format, if you have questions while we're talking, please put them in the Q&A box on Zoom. And I think the easiest way will be for us to answer all the questions at the end, either through the Q&A box or once we're finished, we'll be able to see you raising your hand. So yeah, I think with that, I will get started. So this initial, can everyone see this? There's nothing blocking it, right? Are we good? Great. So this map is to kind of show you the context of the project study area and where we're looking at. So the study area is outlined here in pink. You can see this is Washington Street from basically where it splits at the south end near the turnpike to where it starts to come together at the northern end. Turner's up this way, Portland is down the turnpike that way, and Augusta is out this way. And this project is really rooted in the idea of transportation and mobility improvements. So the first stage of this project is the idea that we could improve Washington Street, make it safer, better mobility for both vehicles and add mobility for pedestrians and bicyclists by changing the way that Washington Street, the traffic flows. So this diagram here, we've changed the orientation, we've flipped it a bit. So you've got downtown Auburn here, New Auburn's over here. This is the Little Androscoggin River. The turnpike's over here. So this is the south end of Washington Street, and this is the north end. And the concept behind this project is the idea that we would turn Washington Street north into a two-way local street that would be a place to promote new business, maybe new residential, new mixed-use development. This would be a slower street, a place where you could walk or bike. And to support this, we would turn Washington Street south into what we're calling a mobility corridor. So this would be another two-way street that would support faster traffic, truck traffic, freight, businesses, things like that. So this idea has been something that the city has thought about for a long time, and we did some initial engineering and the concept seems to work. So that's really what prompted this larger land use and planning study. So now that this is a larger land use and planning study, we've got quite a big team on this project. We have people from the city who are here tonight. We have folks from Androscoggin Transportation Resource Center, Maine DOT. Our engineering team doing the traffic engineering is Goral Palmer. We have land use planning from North Star, and we have landscape architecture from Aceto Landscape Architecture on the team. This project, to give you a quick overview of the timeline. So this fall, we've been working on existing conditions. We've started talking to stakeholders, people who own property or businesses along the corridor. We've been doing some conceptual level planning, and we've been holding public meetings. We did one in person a few weeks ago, and then we're doing this one, which will be recorded for later as well. Following this stage, we're going to start refining the design concepts based on the public input that we receive. We'll also be looking at a zoning framework to help encourage the kinds of land uses that we want to see along the corridor. And we'll have some more meetings, including with City Council and Maine DOT. And then finally, this project is expected to wrap up in spring of 2025 with another public meeting where people will be able to give us more feedback on our designs and a final report. So I wanted to also include kind of the how did we get here for what Washington Street looks like today. So when we had our meeting in person, there were quite a few people who actually remember back when Washington Street was just a single local two-way street before the highway came in. And when so you can sort of see, these are aerials. They're a little hard to read, but this is the Little Androscoggin River. This is going towards downtown Auburn. And so this is 1951, before the highway came to Auburn and when Washington Street was just a single local street. And then you can see in the 70s, after the highway, they split Washington Street into the format we have now with the northbound and the southbound. And again, this is the Little Androscoggin River. And this was done to support the development of industry and really make it easy to get from the highway to various industries in Auburn. But for a long time, the city has been talking about how Washington Street could be a better gateway, a more welcoming way to enter Auburn while still fulfilling the mobility needs for industry, as well as fulfilling the mobility needs for people who live and work there. These are some just examples from the most recent comprehensive plan. Had some goals to have Washington Street be a gateway, to establish streetscape and design criteria to make more attractive development along Washington Street, and just some graphics from previous studies. So this has been something that Auburn has been thinking about for a long time. And really, the basis of our study is this opportunity that we can improve safety and mobility between exit 75 and the city on Washington Street, while also creating a new gateway to Auburn, increasing accessibility for bicyclists and pedestrians, providing opportunities for new residential and commercial development, and improving access to the Little Androscoggin River through new trails, new connections, and places for recreation and open space. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Addie to talk about some of the planning ideas that are informing our work on this project.
Thank you, Kate. That was fabulous. And thank you for everyone who's out tonight. There are quite a few of you, which is really great to see. So I am a planner with North Star Planning, and I just want to talk about the ATRC produced a complete streets manual for Lewiston and Auburn in 2014. So that was about a decade ago. And I hope some of you on this call were actually a part of that process. But really that manual sets the stage for what we're planning to do today, a decade later. Complete streets is a term used to support the whole transportation network. It's the needs of pedestrians to commercial vehicles with infrastructure that can accommodate the most vulnerable, which is the pedestrian, to the more efficient speed, which in this case is the commercial corridor. Safe, vibrant, and prosperous communities share one thing in common, which is the well-connected and increasingly complete street network. So the next slide, if we can go to that. The current conditions, historically, as Kate alluded to earlier, the method of the street design in this region was for efficient pass-through, going from one place to another as quickly as possible for vehicular hierarchy. And so imagine being on this corridor right now, and for many of you that are there, the shoulder is your sidewalk. If you were on one side of the street and you wanted to come over and buy some corn, which is on the left of the screen, you would be taking your life into your own hands. And so there really is no method here for safe passage. There are children on this street that are actually waiting for the school bus daily. And so this is what we're working with. Next slide, please. The next slides are really meant to give you some visual prompts. None of these are designed for specifically Washington Street, but they start giving you a language of what could be done. With a two-way and the improvement of sidewalks, you're actually creating a condition where you're slowing vehicles down, you're giving safe passage for pedestrians, you're also creating an opportunity for cyclists as well. The next slide. And here we're looking at some bike facilities, bike lanes, where we can have protected buffered spaces, again, for different users. This is keeping in mind this concept of multimodal. And then the next slide shows an older format, a Sharrow format that wouldn't be used directly on Washington Street, but would actually be used on the auxiliary streets. As you're coming off of a main connected network of bike facilities, you would then be able to come onto a side street that would have shared space with slower traffic. The next slide, Kate alluded to this gateway concept that Auburn has been thinking about for Washington Street. And imagine coming off of I-95 and seeing more vegetation and banners and a sign that basically allude to, you are arriving at a place. This is a place to slow down. This is a place of pride. And this is a place of community. The next slide also shows treatments such as the banners, but also street lighting, making it safe. So beyond just the physical infrastructure of sidewalks and bike lanes and 2 lanes with slower traffic, you're also looking at elements of safety with the lighting as well. And we can go to the next slide. So all of this isn't just about a road. A road takes you through a place, but a road is also a place. And there is this great concept that a walk shed or a bike shed around slowing traffic down, having more people actually creates a place. And so again, as Kate said earlier, this is a land use study as well as a transportation study. And in looking at the redesign of the local street of Washington, we're really looking at places along Washington Street that can have these pauses, these rhythms that actually interrupt just the pass through and get you to anchor in a place. So if I could go to the next slide. And again, these are images just to prompt. So imagine an intersection with a business core that has local retail or other commercial entities that, again, get people that they can walk there. There's limited parking. But again, it's a place that really, it's traffic calming, but it's also an economic development opportunity. And so again, place and road together. And then the next one. And beyond that, once you create a place, once you create this road, there are many opportunities, again, in the land use study of thinking about housing and development in this area. But the question is, how do we get there? And now I'm going to pass this over to Nick Aceto, as he's really going to take us through this project with our analysis to date, and then we can hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Addie. Nick Aceto with Aceto Landscape Architects. We're a landscape architecture and urban design studio based in Portland. And we have a lot of experience working with a lot of the other consultants on this team, North Star Planning and Goral Palmer, engineers who we've done a number of master planning projects and transportation studies with. I think Kate and Addie stole a little bit of my thunder with the last few slides. A lot of the imagery and concepts that they were talking about are really concepts that are core to our practice. And some of that imagery that Addie was actually sharing with the streetscape elements and the showing some of the mixed use development typologies and housing typologies are all projects that a lot of those we've actually worked on with this team, Goral Palmer in particular. So we're all pretty well synced up with how we approach this corridor and the design. But our role as a project landscape architect, our kind of objective on this project is to kind of help visualize different land use scenarios through this corridor and kind of look beyond the right of way, where we're not just looking at the street and different circulation patterns, but what happens beyond that, and some of the land use implications. Where can we incorporate housing? Where can we incorporate placemaking elements? Addie talked a little bit about placemaking and what that is, and how that kind of correlates to walkability and creating kind of transit-oriented nodes and walkable places. And really this idea of placemaking is really what guides our practice. It's creating a sense of identity, creating neighborhood centers, really drawing on a sense of the place and pulling that into the public eye, so you can really get a sense of kind of where you are, belonging, threshold, and creating this sense of gateway that Kate talked about as you travel through this corridor. So again, this map here is just to orient everyone to where we are in the study area, with exit 75, Route 202, the Washington Street corridor, connecting from 95 to the south, with Portland off to the south, Augusta, connected up to points east and north there, and Turner beyond. So our study area there is between exit 75 and downtown along the Washington Street corridor. And we're going to zoom out just a little bit, or kind of zoom in to talk about context, really. So this map is a quick diagram to look at the existing traffic patterns. As most people know, today, Washington Street north and south is a divided highway condition, high-speed condition, with northbound lanes on Washington Street north, and then southbound lanes on Washington Street south. That's kind of the top and bottom of the page there. Downtown is off to our right. Some of the other colors that you see on the map are the existing sidewalks around downtown primarily, and also the existing bus routes that you see in red, circulating mainly through downtown. And then you can see the urban condition kind of becomes more rural, with fewer and fewer buildings as you work from kind of the right-hand side of the page to the left along Broad Street there. Next slide. And then looking at some of the physical constraints and natural resources through the corridor, that red hash area along the river is intended to denote the 100-year floodplain. We have the Little Androscoggin River corridor that runs through the site today. As you travel along Washington Ave, you really don't get any sense of the river. There's a lot of kind of industrial, heavy commercial, and kind of buffer landscape area. That doesn't really denote a lot about the identity of the downtown and kind of how you're entering the downtown. There is some park and open space parcels and some shoreland zone that we need to consider as well, and can present opportunities and constraints as we look at the area. Next slide. So the proposed traffic pattern, as Kate mentioned, is we're looking at converting the Washington Street South, the top portion of the Washington Street corridor on the page, to a mobility corridor. So that would continue to be a higher speed corridor similar to what's there today, and then converting the Washington Street North, or the bottom of the page where you see the yellow, to more of a local street two-way condition. And in altering that traffic pattern, it opens up some opportunities, as Addie had mentioned, and Kate, with creating some mixed use development, starting to look at that land use pattern along that local street, and maybe converting some of that land use pattern to more mixed use commercial, also residential opportunities. That local street could become more of a slower speed street with on-street parking, maybe eliminating some of the driveways along that street, or consolidating some of those. So as Addie was showing in some of the images, it would open up more opportunity for sidewalks and pedestrian connectivity and creating retail and commercial frontage that's really conducive to walking and getting out of your vehicle and creating that sense of place. We've also looked at connecting Rodman Road across the river. We think that making that connection could, as Kate mentioned, really create some opportunities for additional mobility and safety for especially folks living in the New Auburn neighborhood. These diagrams, I should note, are very high level. They're not specific. They're just intended to kind of signify the intent of the concepts to connect and create these connections across the river to the New Auburn district and potentially to 95. And then these circles that you see on the screen are intended to denote kind of those walking sheds that Addie talked about. It's that quarter-mile kind of shed is a typical 5-minute walk, and that's what has been shown to be kind of a convenient walking distance for most people to say get on a bus or go to local retailer, grab a cup of coffee, where that walking shed is really conducive to kind of a mixed use environment and allows someone to a resident, say, to instead of getting in their vehicle to go get a cup of coffee or groceries, they can walk because it's kind of a convenient distance. So we looked at the creation of these nodes, these walkable nodes along the local street corridor, and that helps start to set the stage for, again, kind of taking a look at altering that traffic pattern, maybe consolidating driveways and access points and starting to build a more walkable corridor. Next slide. So again, looking a little bit at context, the surrounding land use patterns, you can see most of the periphery here off to our left and right is existing residential neighborhoods. And then in and around the Washington Street corridor is primarily heavy commercial and industrial usage. And so again, with the conversion of that traffic pattern from a divided highway condition to a combination of mobility corridor and a local street condition with these nodes of mixed use or neighborhood centers, we can start to look at incorporating some mixed use, some residential development, and then that opens up the opportunity for potential development, but also open space and pedestrian bicycle connectivity from Broad Street south and east of the Little Androscoggin River. Next slide. So again, looking at making that connection across the river, we've discussed the idea of connecting into Broad Street and that becoming a natural center for future mixed use development potentially, or at least a neighborhood center of some form. Maybe there's a little bit more concentration of density there, creating kind of a center of gravity. And then thinking about how bike and pedestrian connectivity could kind of tooth into that and connect across the river as well. Next slide. So again, very, very high level concept, but just looking at how that node starts to create a center of gravity along Broad Street. We can start to think about making connections both along the Little Androscoggin River corridor, but also into and through that kind of New Auburn neighborhood center that's extended out further west or left on the page, creating potential for new neighborhoods, new developments, but also open space and greenway corridors. So again, continuing to think about making that multimodal or bike ped and vehicular connection across the river and new opportunities for neighborhood centers and transit as well. I think that's the last slide I have. I can pass it back to Kate at this point to take any questions. And yeah, glad to take any questions from the group here.
Yeah, thanks, Nick and Addie. So we just threw a lot of information at everyone. Take your time, put some questions in the chat. You can also raise your hand with questions. I'm just going to put this slide up. We have a website for this project. It's littleandrogateway.com. There is a feedback form on that website, as well as more information and a story map where you can kind of scroll through and get more information about each of the sort of pieces of this project. And we also have a survey, that's this link, bit.ly/Washington Street, that will be on the website. This is where you can give us some sort of survey feedback into the different planning concepts and ideas that we're working with. So I'm gonna stop sharing for now so I can see where we are.
Kate, it looks
So-
like we have one question so far in the chat that refers to Nick's last slide, and it says, where does the downwards arrow reach right now? I think it's referring to the arrow that went across the Little Androscoggin.
Yep, so right now we have, like Nick said, these are kind of conceptual level planning ideas. So right now we're talking about the idea of crossing the Little Androscoggin River, creating that connectivity that doesn't exist today. We don't know yet exactly where that connection will be. There isn't a bridge there right now. So what we're really sharing with you is the initial idea and trying to get some feedback. And then as we continue to work with you, the public, people who own property, the engineering team, the city, we'll be able to come up with some more definite ideas about where that crossing might be. So we're getting some more questions in the chat. I see Denise has a question and also has her hand raised. I don't know if you want to talk, Denise, or if oh, you took it down. Okay. Sorry, everyone. I'm reading as I kind of curate here. So Denise asked about maintaining existing neighborhoods and infrastructure and the city's tax base, and basically who is going to maintain all of this. So for that one, I might let Jonathan and Eric, or Eric from the city, give a little more information.
Sure. I think part of our challenge with maintaining roads is that we're spread over such a large area. This really is an attempt to identify a place where people will want to live. It'll be attractive to live, work, invest in businesses, and build new housing in a way that is concentrated rather than spread over the entirety of the city. So creating more tax base, but also creating less miles of roadway per taxpayer or per tax dollar. So over time, we can be more efficient with our maintenance and share the cost of that maintenance over a larger pool of taxpayers. It sounds like there's a sense that new businesses are never required to pay taxes. I think any business that is not tax exempt will have to pay taxes, as well as any home that's not owned by a tax exempt entity would have to pay taxes based on the market value of their real estate, to be fair across the board.
Yeah, if I could just add one small piece on sort of the maintenance and the responsibility for the infrastructure. And I apologize if folks can't see my camera here at the office was acting up. So rather than having it be on the fritz while we talk, I just turned it off. If you look at other communities similar in size to Auburn across the state, I often bring up Scarborough, South Portland, Bangor, Brewer. Those communities have controlled access highways, interstate spurs, mobility corridors, if you will, that are maintained by the state that are providing access to different development areas. Auburn has 5 miles of turnpike, and then that is it. So the ability to think about Washington Street and how the city grows, and Eric described that very well. You know, having a Washington Street North that is a local street, then can position us to have a conversation with our state partners about the future of mobility corridors. That doesn't mean all of those things have been decided, but from the city's perspective, you know, we want to be mindful. You know, how have other communities seen infrastructure investment, and can we apply some of those examples to how we grow our community?
Thanks, Eric and Jonathan. So the next question I have is Mark says he was wondering if the closure and redirection of traffic at the Beach Hill Road and Danville Corner Road intersection is also being addressed in this project. I think I will let Jonathan and maybe Don, who is the lead engineer on this team, take that one.
Yeah, I can try to answer that quickly. There are kind of behind the scenes, there are multiple studies occurring, even though we're talking tonight about Washington Street altogether. Our consultants, our lead consultants here with Aceto and North Star are assisting with the land use planning. The city is really looking forward more about how we're growing as a community, and that will inform the infrastructure piece, which Goral Palmer is leading for us. So that there will be meetings coming in the next month or two that are really hyper-focused on the traffic piece. And that study is Allied Road to right now Brickyard Circle. We'll probably extend that through the Rotary. Obviously, all these pieces connect. So we'll make sure anyone who was in this meeting tonight or was in the other meeting, and there'll be plenty of push through the city's channels. There will be traffic focused meetings, and that will include, looking at near-term and long-term alternatives for Beach Hill and Danville Corner. It is a very high priority. We understand that the safety concerns that residents and we have across city departments. So short answer, there will be a traffic focused meeting, and that will be coming shortly.
Thanks, Jonathan. Don, did you have anything to add to that at this point? No. Okay. All right. Our next question is from Peter, who says, what is the expected time frame for implementation of this new development? Peter, that's a great question. This is a very long-term project. This is the kind of project where, will really happen in stages. The traffic changes and mobility improvements are at the core of this project, and by those will really set the stage, along with some zoning changes that will allow development to happen over time in the patterns that the city wants to see. But I think, you're looking at, and, Don can probably speak more to this, but from the planning to even implementing the traffic side, that would take several years. And then, with the traffic changes and the zoning framework in place, we would expect, to see new development and changes over time. And I'll let anyone else add to that from the team.
Kate, I'll jump in real quick. Don Ettinger with Goral Palmer. Kate's on the money. I think if we do this transportation planning study separate from the land use planning study, we'd like to wrap this up, I think, in the springtime of next year. Then the city would work, hopefully partner with Maine DOT on funding for that work. There's probably 3 years of design effort and right-of-way process. So we typically tell the general public plan on 3 to 5 years from when the planning study is wrapped up before you actually start seeing implementation and improvements and dirt moving.
Great. Eric, did you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I would just say that having, a forward-thinking plan like this would allow for us to make some of the changes to zoning, but also to do that in areas and in ways that won't get in the way of the longer-term elements of the plan, so we could start to see some of the growth while we wait for the longer-term investments for the bigger, more challenging pieces of a project like this over time.
Great. All right. Our next question is from Kate. Kate, not me, says, I'd like to know a little more about the mobility corridor. I imagine that consolidating 2 lanes to 1 in each direction would mean lowering speed limits. I work an hour away and take this route daily. Has anyone looked at what the redesign would mean in terms of longer times to get to 95? I am liking this plan, but would rather my commute not go longer than it already is. So I will turn this probably over to Don, but so just to clarify, when we have our local street and our mobility corridor, the local street is where we're looking at lowering speed limits, slowing traffic, introducing neighborhoods and small and kind of new development. the mobility corridor is being designed by the engineering team to keep that traffic that is just passing through this area moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Kate. And Kate, it's a good question. So the answer is our goal is not to make your commute longer. You would use that mobility corridor, and the goal is to get you from point A to point B in the same duration. What we don't know at this point is what that mobility corridor looks like. Currently, it's 2 lanes. We're going to obviously take a look through this study to find out for the mobility corridor alone, should it be 2 lanes, 3 lanes, or even 4 lanes? So don't assume that we're going to be restricting it down to 2 lanes from currently you have 2 lanes in each direction, so a total of 4 lanes. So those are things that we're looking at, but the ultimate goal is the mobility corridor to allow traffic to move quickly through that corridor.
And Kate, if I could add for Kate and Don, that was a great answer. One of the things that Auburn's very mindful of, and in fact, there'll be another study starting soon to look at Minot Avenue and Court Street, is as the city grows, and obviously there are opportunities right now with the current zoning on Washington Street North for there to be development, that development has the ability, without a plan, to in fact slow traffic down. And at some point, that traffic may choose to use, say, Hotel Road. And I know some traffic coming from the north, say north of the on Center Street, they find other routes, and that's often other routes on local and neighborhood streets. So kind of starting from exit 75, the city is mindful that we want to maintain mobility for visitors, travelers through, and for residents who have to commute, while also trying to accommodate that infill development. So that's very much on our minds, that this is not about creating a corridor where people have to stop at traffic lights every 250 feet.
Thanks, Jonathan. Our next question is anonymous. This is also about timelines for neighborhood development. I think we answered this one in the previous question, but anonymous person, if you have more questions about that, please either raise your hand or drop them in the box. But I think this also ties into the next question, which is about trail. Anonymous also asked about trail development. And our next question from Joe asks about connection to the Casco Bay bike ped trail from Portland, which is proposed to go through Danville Junction. Connecting to existing trails and building on the rail trail opportunities in Auburn is something that is part of our planning for this project. I will let Eric or Jonathan answer, because I know you both have much more detail on the rail trail projects than I do.
Yeah, Joe, thanks for the question. I know you and I have had some of this conversation offline, but for the benefit of others. So the study corridor here, as it was started on the transportation project, is Allied Road, which is about where the park and ride lot is, the old Gates Form Fiber and International Paper entrance through Brickyard Circle. For folks who don't know about the Casco Bay Trail, that's a trail that's proposed to link Portland to Lewiston, Auburn, and then back to Brunswick and to Portland, sort of a big triangle. If you Google Casco Bay Trail, you can see a lot of those initiatives. One of the concepts that is under evaluation right now is using an old rail corridor, the old Grand Trunk line from Portland to Danville Junction for a trail. To get from Lewiston to Brunswick, there is also a rail corridor that you could take. So to get from Auburn back to Lewiston, there's this gap, which Joe is referencing. So yes, providing bike ped access, dedicated access, a shared use path, whether that's how that lays out, is part of this. That will leave us a gap of figuring out what does it look like to get from Danville Junction to Allied Road. But we have been talking with Maine DOT as a partner and the Turnpike at some point over the next year to scope an evaluation of exit 75. And that's really an area where the city will put on the table. We want to get pedestrians and cyclists through that area to connect with the rest of the corridor. At the northern end, the city has received federal funding to extend the Riverwalk system from Bonnie Park, where it kind of crosses into Lewiston now, down or upstream of the Little Andro to Brickyard Circle, which gets us right into the study area. So we are slowly working at each end, but this study is really a key piece to designating where that route would come through a development area and connect with the Little Andro.
Thanks, Jonathan. And then I think, did we have a hand up? No, we don't have a hand up. Okay. Next question, anonymous. Does city water and sewer already exist along both sides of Washington, or will new infrastructure be required? And will it be adequate to tie into proposed new development areas? So this is another one where there is some public water and sewer infrastructure along this corridor now, and the city is actively working on a project that would be federally funded to extend and loop the water and sewer infrastructure throughout our project area. And I think this is another one where I will let Eric or Jonathan provide more detail.
Sure, we have applied for funding, and it looks fairly promising to do exactly what you said along Broad Street, Hackett Road, and the Washington Street, the current northbound corridor. The mobility corridor really doesn't need access to any of those utilities because it'll remain pretty undeveloped so that it's safe and higher speed. But then there may still be sections where individual projects could connect to the extended water and sewer and have the individual projects pay for some smaller extensions too, as time goes on.
Thanks, Eric. Our next question, would there be any opportunity here to require housing on upper levels of new development along the local road? That kind of mixed use development is exactly the kind of thing that we would envision for these neighborhood nodes. The kind of sort of neighborhood type intersection where you might have like a corner store or a small business with apartments above it. That's exactly the kind of thing that we're hoping to promote in several nodes here, and the sort of with the idea that the businesses and the residential will kind of support each other. The new people who live there will shop at the local businesses. Yeah, does anyone have anything else to add there? Addie or Nick? No? Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So we have, let's see. With the limited space between Washington Street North and the river, why isn't the focus for additional housing focused on improving Broad Street and South Main and get MTA to put an exit at South Main? So I think what this question is getting at, which is true, you can see on the constraints map that Nick showed before, that between Washington Street North and the Little Androscoggin River, there are some environmental and site constraints there. There's some floodplains on parts of the river, and then on the parts that have smaller floodplains, that's due to very steep slopes. So there are some areas, you're right, where there are not huge, vast areas for development. However, there are still a lot of opportunities for development and especially redevelopment in these areas of the city that are already served by roads and infrastructure. And I think this is sort of exactly why our project is looking at a connection across the Little Androscoggin River, because that would really create more connectivity through, New Auburn, Washington Street, downtown, the Turnpike, kind of just improving the way you can circulate around here and opening up new opportunities for development in that South Main, Broad Street area, where there are people who are interested in potentially doing projects there. So this would sort of help to bring the kind of road infrastructure along with what Eric talked about, public water and sewer infrastructure that would allow that to happen. Does anyone else from the team want to add anything there? No? Okay, thanks. So I have a question here about if the rail trail means we're giving up rail service. I can throw in that when the state of Maine does rail trail, rail to trail planning studies, they do look at the sort of what they call rail with trail, which leaves the opportunity that you could have rail service there in the future. But I will let the city jump in if you have any more insight on the rail service in this area.
I'll touch on that briefly. Certainly from a freight rail perspective, that is alive and well. The former Pan Am CSX is a Class 1 railroad that does serve customers in Auburn. The western edge of the study area is served by the Lewiston Auburn Railroad corridor, which is operated by St. Lawrence and Atlantic. From a passenger rail perspective, which often does come up, I did mention the old Grand Trunk and its potential for a trail. The current city position has been to support rail with trail, looking at protecting that rail corridor and developing a trail alongside it. The council is taking up now whether or not to change that position to being interim trail, which would mean taking up the tracks. To be mindful in terms of future opportunities, this Washington Street corridor runs parallel with the CSX corridor. The Downeaster service, intercity service, does run along CSX in Maine, in New Hampshire. So conceivably, if passenger rail Downeaster style service could emerge, the state could negotiate with CSX, and you could see perhaps, at the northern end by Brickyard Circle, maybe there would be a passenger station there. There are still pathways to that. From Danville north to Montreal is still an active rail line. So conceivably, there are still multiple ways that passenger rail from the south could reach Auburn, even if there is a trail project there. There are other pieces to that are a whole nother study or 10 which have been done. And if you follow up through the comments on the website, I'd be happy to send you along some links to those if that would help answer your question in more detail.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, so this is a question that might be best answered by our engineer, putting you on the spot, Don. As infrastructure is upgraded, are the higher water volumes associated with climate change being taken into account? So I'm guessing that this is really getting at, as you're designing roads, culverts, things like that, are you looking at potential higher volumes of rain and storms and things like that?
The simple answer is yes, we'd like to, but the longer answer is we're going to follow the rules and regulations that our client dictates to us. So Maine DOT has procedures that we will need to follow for stormwater design, culvert sizing, and those items. So DOT is well aware of the concerns about these extreme storms that we've been getting, 20-year storm events, 50-year storm events every year. They're actively working on that front, but we're going to follow their lead for our stormwater design and make sure that they and the city are comfortable with what's being proposed.
Thanks, Don. Okay, and I have one more question. Will this project have an influence on exit 75 interchange and its layout? This person notes that the Maine Army National Guard uses that exit for transportation of heavy equipment, which has a larger turn radius than a standard tractor trailer. So I will let Don, I think, take that one as well.
Yeah, I can jump in, and Jonathan certainly can add to it, but Jonathan's mentioned our study limits start at Allied Road and head north. So the exit 75 interchange is not currently in our study scope. It is a large intersection, and I can understand that it's designed for those very large vehicles. So, so currently we're not scoped to do that. I know the city has some ambitions to maybe revisit the exit 75 interchange and maybe have some different connections. But for the purposes of this study, we're starting just north of it where the park and ride is, and heading north. So we wouldn't be changing the geometry or the vehicle size for that intersection as part of this study.
Thanks, Don. So we got through all the questions you wrote into the chat. I want to invite anyone to just use the raise your hand feature if you have any comments, questions, anything else you want to say, anything you want to ask this team. We open it up to you. Let's see.
Looks like Bruce added
Yeah.
another question. Yep.
Thanks, Bruce. Okay, if there is a new road from New Auburn that connects to Rodman Road, so this is referring to a potential bridge across the river, will that require a signalized intersection at Rodman and additional turning lanes? I will just note that, like we said, we're in the sort of conceptual stages of this project. We don't have, full engineering concepts for any of these intersections yet. And, we are on the mobility corridor. It's kind of in the name. We are prioritizing the mobility of vehicles as unimpeded as they can be to really get through Auburn to get to and from the highway. I don't know if we have a better answer than that yet, but I'll turn it over to Dawn if you have something to add.
Yeah, the question was related to Rodman Road and a connection with a Broad Street crossing. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so we're definitely going to take a look. Rodman Road is very important to this study area. We anticipate Rodman Road will provide a connection to that mobility corridor. It probably will not be signalized, but it will be a connection. It might be grade separated or some other form. So what we don't know, we believe there will be a connection with Rodman and the mobility corridor. We're unsure if there will be a connection with Rodman, the bridge that takes you over to Broad Street, and the local street corridor. That's where we're a little unclear whether that will provide a connection point. But Kate's right. We haven't gotten that far yet. We're kind of we want to let this land use planning aspect of it kind of take hold first, and then that will inform what we should be doing from a transportation perspective and a connection perspective.
Thanks, Dawn.
And I'll just chime in. I know Bruce owns a business on the corridor, and a lot of his customers and his team. I mean, there's a lot of commercial truck traffic that's on Washington North. It's trying to reach Rodman in particular for customers or otherwise. The study team, Goral Palmer, the data that's been collected, we're very mindful of the split of traffic that's freight and where those freight operators are looking to go, because obviously their ability to navigate certain environments, added signalized intersections, turn lanes, grades, all create challenges and inconvenience and inefficiency for the trucking community. So I just want to reiterate that is important. I know it's important for DOT on the mobility side as well. So at the first traffic meeting, I certainly encourage you, Bruce, and others interested in that trucking piece to make sure you're part of that, to give us your input.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think while I wait to see if anyone has any more questions or wants to raise your hand, I'm just going to share this slide from the end so you can see littleandrogateway.com. That's the project website. Please go on there. You can sign up, add your email to be added to a mailing list where we'll send updates, future meetings, things like that. There's also a feedback form on the website where you can ask additional questions, share additional ideas or feedback you have. That all goes directly to me, and I share it with the project team. And this link at the top is a short survey about some of the different types of development on Washington Street. The link to that will also be on the website, but if you want to take that survey, please use that link there. So I will just leave that up. I think we have another question.
It's a great comment. Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Okay.
And thank you everyone who's been giving thumbs up on this too.
I don't know if I can see while I share this, but if someone else can just let me know if there's any other questions or hands raised. I'll just leave this up for a couple minutes in case people want to grab these links. And I don't think we have any additional meetings scheduled yet, Jonathan. But yeah, please come to the website, sign up with your email to be kept in the loop about any future meetings. I know the city's also been posting them on Facebook. So please stay in touch. We want to hear from you. Is there anything, any Q&A or anything coming in that we need to answer?
So we are getting great work from Jeremiah. Thank you.
Jeremiah.
This was clear and helpful. I support the project from Peter. Kate says this looks promising. I'm tired of warning guests to ignore what it looks like coming into town. Thanks for your work. So thank you, everyone. And And there is a meeting for the transportation coming up is it in December, Dawn? Is there
I
a
don't
public?
believe I don't think it's been scheduled yet.
Okay,
But
great.
it will be in the coming months, yes.
Okay, brilliant, great. So thanks team from Dana, thank you. Heather says very exciting, thank you. This is the fun part of doing the comments actually, so thank you for letting me take this part.
Okay, well, I think I've given everyone a chance to check out these links. Again, if you registered, I think we'll have your email and we can send this information out afterwards as well. And probably probably early next week. So yeah, I think with that, anybody else from the team, do we have any comments, thoughts, things to share?
No, just thanks for your work on this. We're pretty excited about it. There isn't another study that we've done in my 18 years that I think this could be more transformative than any other study we've done, I think. And it's exciting. And it's taken a couple comp plans to get to this point.
Great.
Great. Well, thank you everyone who attended tonight. We're really glad that you are interested, and yeah, please keep coming to meetings and tell us what you think. We look forward to hearing from you all.